Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Yes, I know it's been a long time since I made a video, but today we're back with another Efactory video, and this time it's coilovers. So unfortunately, as you can see, I went drifting last weekend and I got in a little bit of a crash. So this is my fender, definitely not repairable. Let's kind of go over what happened. Basically, I was driving with Kevin and a couple other guys on a different team, and somebody spun out, and then a couple of us got in a pileup. The damage on my car, I will post a picture here of it's not a very good picture, but of what this looked like after the crash. It actually bent my coilover super bad. As you can see, it's not supposed to do that. Big old bend right there. And it's also bent at the top, but that's partially because of how I fixed it. As I got hit the top of my wheel with Kevin's bash bar, it pushed this whole wheel in. It actually pushed my strut tower over a whole inch. So this throttle body actuator here was actually pressing up against my hose clamp here, and I was only able to get like maybe an 1/8 throttle out of it because it was that far pushed over. So what we ended up doing was I just did a quick measurement of the center of my engine bay, took a measurement from here to the strut tower bolt and to this one, and this one's never been hit, so it should be where it needs to be. So I measured about 23 inches to this bolt, and then another 23 inches to this bolt, but initially it was 22 until we did this. After that, it's now 23, sitting where it needs to be, roughly. I ended up having to replace my coilovers at the track with my Efactory coilovers. The install was easy. I did it in the pits at the track, and believe it or not, the Efactory angle kit didn't even bend at all, so I didn't have to worry about that. Another fun thing that happened was you guys remember me making this? I made a video. I made this e-brake handle with a skateboard wheel on top, and it snapped off in the crash because I was holding onto it trying to slow down, and it just snapped off the car. Since I've already installed the front coilovers, what I'm going to do for you guys is I'm going to take out one of the front coilovers and then reinstall it, just to kind of go through the process of that, and then we're going to install the rear coilovers, and we'll have a full set of Efactory coilovers in our car. Well, all you're really going to need to install your front coilovers is we got an impact gun, which you really don't need an impact gun. It can be replaced by a ratchet, but you know, it's just a beautiful thing to have. We need a breaker bar for cracking loose our wheels, and some of the nuts can be pretty tight on there. Pry bar comes in handy when you're installing them. Obviously the ratchet, if you want to, a couple extensions come in handy. We got an 18 mil, we got a 17 mil, we got a 13 mil. 18 mil is going to be for most of the hardware on the bottom of the strut mount. 17 mil is going to be for your wheels. 13 mil is going to be for your sway bar and for your top strut mounts. Now, this is basically just for our wheels, which is a 17 mil. 13 mil wrench for our sway bar, and an 18 mil to help with that top mount on the bottom of the knuckle. And this is a torque wrench. This obviously isn't mandatory. This is basically just to torque your wheels once you get them back on. And of course, you're going to need a jack and a jack stand. This jack actually has a built-in jack stand where if you jack it up high enough, you can throw this pin through it and it becomes a jack stand. Otherwise, I recommend just using a jack stand. Next up, we got the wheel off. That's easy. I'm just gonna pop the brake line out of this little clip. Basically, just push it out by hand. Don't really use any tools on it. You could puncture the line, so I'm just gonna pop that off by hand, like so. Next up, we're just gonna take this through bolt out. It's a 18 mil nut and bolt, and it slides out. Once we get this out, we're gonna turn the wheel full lock to the left. That way it's gonna make it easier to get the two bottom ones out. Now, before we go ahead and take these two bottom 18 mils out all the way, we're gonna go ahead and pop the 13 mil nut and bolt out of our sway bar link. That way, the swing arm has a better chance of giving us a little bit more room to lower it down so we can get the shock in and out a little bit easier. One, two. Now that this is all undone, it's still kind of in there, right? So we're just gonna grab our pry bar and kind of just pop it loose. Go in there. All right, bottom is completely separated. Now all we have to do is undo the top and it's out. As you can see, the difference here of how straight the new one is versus the old one. This is what happens when you hit another car with your car. And this is what happens when you buy new coilovers. So at the track, I basically just took it out. I used the good coilover to just mock the height of the same exact ride height I had in there before because it worked fine. And then I just threw them back in. So now we gotta just install the coilover back in. It's the exact same but reverse. So we're gonna install the top mounts first and then the bottom. The only tricky part about this is sometimes it's a bit annoying to get the bottom pin to line up and go into place because it's a little bit tight, but that's why we undid the bottom sway bar linkage so that we had a little bit of extra room so we can slide in no problem. Another thing to point out is how you can install these coilovers. So the top hat's quite adjustable when it comes to camber. And it depends whether you install it. So this is the way I install mine so that I can get full control of my camber. With the Efactory setup, this works awesome because I already have lots of caster options when it comes to adjusting my Efactory kit. So you can actually install these like this, and this is what I did when I had my old angle kit set up because the car wouldn't self-steer as much as I liked it to. So putting it like, installing it a bit sideways, I actually made it so I got more caster, which helped the car self-steer. But with this setup, I have my steering in the Efactory kit. It actually works a lot better like this for me. That way I get the alignment that I like, and it drives awesome. But before I install this, let's get a little bit of a better look at the Efactory angle kit. After using it for over a year now, this is the side that got hit, and none of this stuff bent. It's super strong, tubular welded. There's a bolt-on adapter, extended tie rod, and the Efactory control arm, which has a adjustable lollipop right there. You can actually choose your Ackerman here. It's just been an awesome kit. I literally have no complaints about it. The sway bar bolts right in, no problem. Nothing binds or hits or rubs. It's just been an all-around amazing angle kit. So this, you can actually use my link in the description to also get a discount on the angle kit as well as the coilovers, or just use code Shane on their website and you can get yourself a good deal on these coilovers and anything on their site. But these are the two products that I run, and they have been nothing but awesome. And these coilovers felt noticeably way better than the max speeding rods. I was very surprised at how well they performed right out of the box. Make sure when you install it that the brake line is going to be behind the coilover. Don't try and install it with it like this. You'll have a hell of a time. You have to take it out. We're going to go ahead and just slide this up and just start the nuts by hand. Alright, now that those are in, we're going to go ahead and get the top piece in place. Now this takes a bit of muscling around. We'll get her done. So I always like to put the top one in first, It's actually a shoulder bolt, so don't try and use any old bolt. It has to be this bolt because it's the right size for it. Another thing that really helps is just to grab a flathead screwdriver, and it'll just help you line up this top hole a bit better. Go ahead and throw our bolt in. And now that that's in, we're just gonna go ahead and take the nut and washer and just put it on the other side loosely. And I actually do recommend you use, especially on a drift car, there's so much going on the track, vibrations, bumps. This is just some blue light Loctite. I'm gonna be putting on all the hardware when installing this, minus the top mounts. I don't put it on the top mounts. Put some blue Loctite on there, and we'll get this bottom buttoned up. It's just going on hand tight just to kind of hold this in place. I'm actually gonna knock this in a little bit more with a hammer. That way the shoulder's fairly seated in, and we shouldn't have a problem lining these bottom ones up now. This is where also the pry bar comes in handy. And one more thing, a rubber mallet would help too. So the goal here is just to get that little locator pin started before you start putting your bolts in. Now that we got that located, throw a little bit of blue sauce on this guy and throw her in. Now I do like to start these with a ratchet. It would really suck to cross thread these, especially at the track. So we're just gonna start it with the ratchet. That's going in nicely. Okay, that one's threading good. Now we can go ahead and hammer in with the gun. Now that those are tight with the gun, we're gonna go ahead and give it a little bit of oomph with the breaker bar. Not too much. I don't know the torque spec to this, and I don't think it really matters. Just get them tight, but don't break the bolts. Yeah, I wanna say we're putting like 100 foot-pounds on here or so. So that's tight. Now that we're here, let's just go ahead and throw our grommet back in for the brake line. Boom, done. And then let's go ahead and straighten the wheel, tighten this top guy. Now don't forget to reinstall your lower, your linkage for your sway bar here. Once we got all that buttoned up for sure, we got our top nut and bolt good and tight with Loctite. We got our two bottom ones good tight with Loctite. We got our grommet back in place for our brake line, and we got our sway bar back in place. And we're just gonna do a final little cinch up here, because we just put those on with the gun. Tight, tight, and tight. I run pretty much max camber that I can get out of these coilovers. When it comes in the box, you can actually move these nuts around. There's a couple different spots on the top hat that you can move the camber plate to get more camber out of it. That's what I did to get more camber out of it, because I like to run a lot of camber in the front for drifting. But now that you got that all installed, buttoned up, we're gonna throw the wheel back on, and then it would basically be time to get the front end aligned. So as you can see, E36 coilovers are actually super easy to install and to remove your old stuff. So I don't see why anybody can't tackle this on their own if they buy a set of coilovers. So let's talk a little bit about how these coilovers work and how to set them up on the basic side of things. So basically, your ride height, you're gonna wanna adjust with this bottom collar. The coilovers come with two collar keys that are basically wrenches that work with all these collars. So you want to loosen this off, and then you'd actually want to spin this whole thing up or down to get your ride height. Now the chop I just left as factory preload, so it's the preload of the spring. So which will actually, it will affect ride height as well. So I would get your preload set and then get your ride height set. Obviously if you tighten this and you make the spring more compressed, you're going to get more preload. If it's looser, you're going to get less preload. So it's going to be stiffer with more preload right off the bat than it would be if you had it looser. So I just left it the same out of the box and tightened it up, and then I just adjusted my ride height to match what I had before. Another thing that these have, besides the camber adjustment that I talked about already, is their 32-way adjustable dampening. So what that means is from end to end, you can click it 32 times, and basically it says right there on the top, probably gonna be hard to read, but says hard and soft, so you click it all the way to the left, it's going to be a softer, which is basically going to mean it's going to be softer, it's going to be slower to rebound in general, and hard, it's going to be harder to rebound, and it's going to be stiffer. So I like to set mine about in the middle. Front and rear both have the same adjustments, and then you can just play with them at the track and decide, like, oh, is your front end not getting enough grip? Is it getting too much grip? You can adjust, make these little micro adjustments that make your car feel dialed in. On the back, it's the same thing, except for there's the coil and the spring are different, or they're separated. So you're just going to adjust your ride height by adjusting this here and this lock collar. And same thing on the top here. We got our 32-way adjustable dampening, and it's the same idea as the front. I like to set these on the softer side in the rear so that I can get more grip and the car stays squatted. Now, spring rates, front and rear, out of the box, they're 8K. You can order custom spring rates. So if you want to order coilovers from Efactory, send them an email before you place your order, and you'll be able to get the spring rates that you want for your coilovers. You can order extra springs if you want to try different spring rates. That's fine. So far, I've run 8K front, 8K rear, and it feels good to me. I may try a different spring rate in the rear eventually, or if you were to do a motor swap, like my friend Aaron did. He's got BMW V8 in his car, so it's a lot heavier. He actually went with the 10K front springs instead of the 8K so that it can support the extra weight of the engine. When it comes to these collars, I found on most BMW coilover setups, I actually don't even run these at all because it makes the car ride too high with all this extra spacing. I usually just run the spring with or without the perches, but I'm going to kind of assess that as we do the rear coilovers to see where the max speeding rod ones sit now compared to how these sit, if they're a different height or whatever. We'll assess that when we get to it. The front coilovers are super easy to install. You think that was easy? Well, guess what? The rears are even easier. You know why? Because there's half the bolts and half the and it doesn't steer. So all we really need to do is take out the bottom bolt and take out the top bolts and take the spring out and replace it, which isn't required any hardware. Basically, this is what holds it in. Just a quick little thing, we are going to be doing a small little giveaway at the end of the video if you stick to the end, for the true homies that stick to the end through the thick and the thin. We're going to be doing a little bit of a giveaway, and we'll explain that at the very end. All you need to do is get a jack and a jack stand. We're going to want our torque wrench when we put our wheel back on. We're just going to use a ratchet with a 13 mil and an 18 mil. Breaker bar for if the bottom bolt is very in there. Pry bar, I don't think, this actually comes in handy when removing the spring. So the only real difference between my car and a stock car is I don't run a rear sway bar in this car for drifting. I like it without it. It gives me more grip and more side bite and whatever. It feels good for me. If you run a sway bar, it's just going to make it a little bit harder to get the spring out. You may want to undo the end link so that you can drop that lower control arm and get the spring out a little bit easier. So what we're going to do is jack this car up, get the wheel off. is you can do this either by doing the front, or sorry, you can either do the bottom bolt first or the top bolt first. If you're gonna do the bottom bolt first, I recommend having a jack on the bottom of your trailing arm so that it doesn't just fly down. It could possibly ruin your bolt or your bolt hole threads inside the trailing arm here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna do the top first, just because I don't have a spare jack to do that. That's kind of why I recommend having a jack under there, because your spring is going to push down on it and it'll kind of just fly apart. But nobody was hurt because nobody else is here. So yeah, I do recommend having something underneath your trailing arm, or else this kind of will fly apart, and it's going to help when installing it to have another jack, or to not use your jack as a jack stand, which I'm going to have to figure out in a minute here. But so we got the two tops undone. We're gonna get this bottom bolt undone and then take that out. Right now, I can literally just pop my spring out because it was just sitting in there. And that's what I meant by this kind of holding it all together. So we have our factory kind of rubber insert here, top and bottom, and our spring. All right, now that we got these out, let's compare the springs. So I did actually, so basically on the max speeding rod, I just took all the out and I ran just the spring. Now the only issue with that is the spring perch grommet on the E36 is like this big. So the spring has room to wiggle around in there. Now with these, this fits that spring perch grommet. So on both sides we have one on the bottom. There's a nylon spacer in between the metal and the spring, this guy here. And then I just took the bottom coil out. So instead of having two coils in, I took this guy out because I don't want the extra height. But putting this all together with the perch and the one collar and the nylon washer, everything's tight and the height is about the same. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to match up the height of the old coilover versus the new one, and then when I put it in the car, it should sit the way it was sitting. But there's one more comparison I want to do. I want to see how the rebound is versus max speeding rod versus the Efactory. So max speeding rod in the drift car for, I want to say, almost 4 seasons. Easy to push down. I think it might be blown, or I can't remember if this is the way these pieces of garbage worked, but I can't even, it's not going up on its own, is basically what I'm saying here. So all it really was doing was helping with dampening. It was not really doing anything with rebound. So there's that. And then we got the Efactory one, which is noticeably harder to push down. And as you can see, it's actually going up by itself how it should. And one thing that I really strongly suggest doing is, so I believe this is how the stock bolt, washer, nut, bolt onto car. Cool. But what happens if this fails, this bushing here, which in this one, it's actually pretty loose anyways. So this one actually has noticeably better quality bushing on the bottom, but it would still cause the same problem. See how that washer is smaller than the bushing on both of these? If this bushing were to blow out, this whole bottom strut tower can just go right past your nut, or your bolt, sorry, and the whole strut will just fall off your trailing arm, and that's not a good time. I've never had that happen because this is what I do. I run a big washer. Boom, big washer together. If that bottom bushing blows out, it's not going to fall off your trailing arm. It'll just be clunky, which is much better than it completely falling off. So I'm going to run the same washer. It's not even the right size washer for this bolt, but it basically just serves a purpose. There's no real fitment issue we're looking at here. Another cool feature about these coilovers, say you wanted to change your ride height with this bolted in the car, and it was a little bit hard to do it with everything bolted together. If you were to unbolt this bottom piece here, it actually has wrench grooves on it. So you can throw a wrench on there and turn this, whereas the cheaper coilovers do not have that feature. And it's just a lot beefier. This is welded steel, and this is all CNC'd material. Just a way better quality stuff. So, and another nice thing, it's got a wave washer in between the collar and the mount, so that when you tighten this down, it's a whole lot less likely to come loose. So I'm about ready to throw the spring in. What I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna put a little bit of grease just on the nipples of the spring perch holders so that my collars will slide on a lot easier. Once you got your bottom bolt in, I got a jack stand over here on the rocker, and I'm going to use my jack to push this up into position. The spring's nice and seated in there, perfect. So let's squish that into place. Alright, now all we have to do is throw in these top two. Get our terrible strut bar aligned. And that's it. See, the spring's nice and in there. We got Loctite on the bottom here. We've tightened that up. We tightened the top ones. Now if you want to adjust your ride height, all you have to do is loosen this collar and adjust this up and down. Like I said, if it's being stubborn up here, you can unbolt this again and just turn the bottom half. It'll be easier to turn that way. But there you have it. It's all installed and done. I'm going to throw my wheel back on and do the other side, but I don't need to show you guys that because it's the same as this side. Well, thank you for sticking around and watching this video, guys. Like I said, I was going to be doing a little bit of a giveaway. So what we got here for you is this guy. We've got an Efactory banner. It's kind of hard to see in here, but it is the exact same as the one that's on my car. It's reflective, it's cool, it's big, it's large, and it's yours. So I only have one banner to give away, so all you have to do is follow myself and Efactory on Instagram, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and leave a comment on this video telling me where you're from. And I will randomly pick someone to send this banner to wherever they may be. If you liked the video and you found some value out of it and it helped you out, please like, subscribe, comment on the video, and we'll be sure to make some more videos for you guys. All right, until next time, we'll catch you later.